Hey everyone, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at what honestly might be the single most incredible irony in all of human history. We're going to trace this massive butterfly effect, looking at how a ninth century Chinese quest for eternal life accidentally birthed the absolute most destructive technology the world has ever seen. It's this wild story of happy accidents, gradual accumulation, and insanely rapid global migration. So, how exactly does a botched immortality potion end up completely redrawing the global map? Well, it all starts with Taoist alchemists up in the mountains of China's Sichuan or Shaanxi provinces. And here's the thing, these monks were absolutely not trying to invent a weapon. Not at all. They were just trying to live forever. They were totally convinced that the right mix of minerals would give them an elixir of immortality. But sometime in the 9th century, one specific batch did literally the exact opposite of granting eternal life. It blew up. Historical records literally describe monks singeing their beards right off and burning down their own workshops. And man, that one accident sparked a butterfly effect that changed the entire course of humanity. You know, the original Chinese term for this stuff is actually huo yao, which literally translates to fire medicine. I kind of love that because it carries this faint, almost embarrassing memory of its original purpose as a totally failed pharmaceutical. For generations, this volatile powder had absolutely nothing to do with warfare. It was strictly used for festival fireworks, smoke signals, and religious ceremonies. It was just a flashy spectacle. But of course, the magic behind that spectacle was really just hardcore chemistry. The massive 75% share of saltpeter, or potassium nitrate, acted as an oxidizer. When you heat it up, it rapidly releases oxygen, feeding this extremely fast, violent combustion reaction with the charcoal and the sulfur. That reaction produces a sudden and massive expansion of gas. And frankly, that rapidly expanding gas is the entire secret behind literally everything gunpowder would eventually be used to do. Section 1. The bamboo to bronze leap, containing the pressure. So, once military commanders during the Song dynasty finally saw what this powder could do, everything changed. Between the 10th and 12th centuries, Chinese engineers whipped up the hu guo cheng, or fire lance. It was brutally simple, really. Just a bamboo tube strapped tightly to a spear packed full of gunpowder. They used it to devastating effect at the Siege of Dian in 1132, where it essentially acted like a primitive flamethrower, spewing fire and burning debris right into the faces of attackers. But at this point, it still relied heavily on psychological intimidation. I mean, imagine being a soldier trained to fight with standard swords, and suddenly the guy across from you is projecting literal fire. But engineers being engineers, they quickly figured out they could do way more than just scare people. They started packing shards of pottery and tiny pellets into the bamboo too. And that brings us to a completely game-changing mechanical threshold. See, the bamboo fire lance had a pretty fatal flaw. Bamboo splits under extreme pressure. It just couldn't handle larger gunpowder charges without blowing up in the poor user's hands. But once craftsmen made the leap from using organic bamboo to casting incredibly strong bronze tubes, wow, everything shifted. These new metal hand cannons could safely contain the massive pressure of that expanding gas, meaning they could forcefully launch a single solid projectile with just terrifying force and range. This transition right here, from bamboo to metal barrels, wasn't just a slight upgrade, it was the true birth of the firearm. The entire goal shifted from just trying to scare the enemy to inflicting serious, penetrating physical injury from a distance. Section 2. The Mongol Highway. History's accidental delivery system. By the 13th century, those metal-barreled hand cannons were absolutely dominating battlefields in China. So when the Mongols invaded in the 1200s, they ran face first into these devastating weapons at sieges like Kaifeng in 1232. But here is the crazy part. Rather than being defeated by the technology, the Mongols just completely absorbed it. As they established the Yuan dynasty and aggressively pushed westward across Asia towards the Islamic world, they dragged these heavy bronze cannons right along with them. In doing so, the Mongol Empire functioned almost like a high-speed, entirely accidental delivery system. They migrated this Chinese invention across the entire breadth of Eurasia in just a few generations, way, way faster than any standard trade caravan ever would have. Section 3. Reshaping European warfare. The fall of feudalism. Once this tech traveled that Mongol highway and finally landed in Europe in the late 13th century, it encountered a medieval landscape that it was about to permanently dismantle. It really just boils down to one brutal truth. Expanding gas absolutely does not care how much expensive steel armor you happen to be wearing. For centuries, the undisputed king of the European battlefield was the elite, heavily armored mounted knight. But suddenly, a cheap, super crude hand cannon held by a commoner with minimal training could easily punch a hole right through that expensive plate armor. Practically overnight, the entire feudal social order, which relied heavily on that incredibly expensive cavalry, just began to collapse. And because of that, the very architecture of warfare had to pivot just to survive. Those classic, traditional medieval castles with their tall, majestic, but thin stone walls, dangerously obsolete. They were awesome against scaling ladders and arrows, but a heavy cannonball would shatter them into pieces. So military engineers had to adapt, and they created the Star Fort. These were low, incredibly thick, angled bastions explicitly designed to deflect and absorb heavy cannon fire. The whole physical layout of European cities changed forever, all because of a weapon that originated half a world away. Section 4. The Mechanical March, Igniting the Infantry Revolution. Now, despite the raw power of those early hand cannons, they were actually a nightmare to use. You practically needed 3 hands and extreme luck to aim one. You had to physically hold the heavy metal barrel steady with one hand while trying to precisely touch a glowing, burning ember to a tiny hole with the other. Just wildly impractical. But the late 15th century invention of the matchlock solved this beautifully. They attached a slow-burning cord to a mechanical trigger clamp called a serpentine. Now, one single trained soldier could actually hold, steady, and aim the weapon with both hands, with real precision. That one mechanical tweak turned clunky battlefield novelties into the absolute backbone of organized infantry. And man, this matchlock totally sparked a global arms race, spreading like wildfire right back along those old Eurasian trade routes. The Ottomans snapped it up and integrated it into their elite Janissary Corps. Over in Japan, Portuguese traders showed up with them in 1543, leading to the legendary, highly prized Tanegashima muskets. And in a genuinely hilarious historical loop, China, the exact place where gunpowder was born, actually had to reabsorb this newly improved European matchlock technology just to fight off ongoing Mongol incursions on their borders. They called them burden guns. Of course, the matchlock was far from perfect. Think about it. It required a constantly burning open flame. So what happens when it rains, or when you're trying to hide your position in the pitch dark? Yeah, not great. So engineers relentlessly iterated. They tried the incredibly complex wheel lock for cavalry, but the true ultimate breakthrough was the weather-resistant flintlock, perfected around 1610 by a French gunsmith named Marin Le Bourgeois. The flintlock was so reliable that it utterly dominated warfare for over 2 centuries, right up until the chemical percussion cap made all of those older, spark-based mechanisms obsolete in the 1800s. Now here is where it all comes together perfectly. When you take that ultra-reliable flintlock and pair it with the socket bayonet, you get the ultimate European infantry revolution. See, earlier armies had to use heavily armored pikemen just to protect the vulnerable musketeers, while they went through the long reloading process. But the socket bayonet was genius. It's a blade that fits around the outside of the barrel, meaning the gun can still fire normally while it's attached. Instantly, every single soldier on the battlefield could function as both a shooter and a spearman. It vastly simplified logistics, training, and completely reshaped military tactics. And that brings us to a final, really provocative thought. This entire explainer has been a story about the migration of ideas. We went from basic bamboo tubes to heavy bronze cannons spread by the sheer momentum of the Mongol Empire, all the way to flintlocks dominating global empires. It is just wild to step back and realize that centuries of shattered castles, massive colonial conquests, and the entire modern architecture of warfare literally all trace back to one accidental chemical explosion by a few monks who just wanted to live forever. So what would the balance of global power look like today if they hadn't? Hey everyone,